If you are a beginner woodworker, these are my top 10 tools that I recommend you buy. I could be wrong, but I think a lot of people are gonna give me some grief on what I list as number 10, but I'm just giving you my honest opinion. Here we go. Tool number 1 is a circular saw. Now, you can get circular saws in a lot of different variations. You can get them corded, like this Makita one is. You can get them battery powered. Those are getting more and more popular these days. You can also get lots of different blade sizes. I've seen 5.5, 6.25, 7.25. There's a lot of different blade sizes. Here's what I would recommend is I would start off with something that you can cut through at least something 2 inches thick. That's gonna give you enough versatility to cut through 2x4s, 2x6s, sheets of plywood, all of the basic things like that. A circular saw is very versatile because it can make cross cuts. It can cut wood down to a shorter length, but can also make rip cuts. In other words, it can make boards more narrow going this way with the grain. Not all saws can do that, so that's why I think getting a circular saw is one of the best bets for a beginner woodworker. I'll leave some links in the description to a few circular saws that will be great starting saws for you. All of the tools I talk about, you'll actually see linked down in the description. Up next, we have kind of 2 tools, but drill and impact driver combo set. If you're getting started in woodworking after you picked up a circular saw, I'd recommend you pick up a combination of a drill and impact driver. You might wonder, what is the difference between a drill and impact driver? There are several important differences. I got a couple of sets here for demonstration purposes. A drill has an adjustable chuck, so you can actually put drill bits in a drill. Pretty groundbreaking idea, I know. But you could put drill bits in a drill to bore different size holes. You could put a 1/2 inch drill bit in a drill all the way down to like a 1/8 of an inch drill bit into a drill. A drill also is adjustable. It has an adjustable clutch. So if you're driving a screw into a piece of wood, but you don't want to strip out the head of that screw, then you can clutch down so that when too much tension builds up, the drill essentially stops driving the screw into the board. Impact drivers don't have that. What impact drivers do have is that, one, they're much more compact, which makes them great for working in smaller spaces. If you're installing cabinets and you're inside a cabinet, sometimes an impact driver is much nicer to have. An impact driver, as the name kind of implies, it's going to drive with a lot more force, and it will drive screws into boards without the need to pre-drill a pilot hole. Impact drivers do not have adjustable chucks. They only accept these little 1/4 inch chuck bits that are kind of narrow there in the middle. This narrow part, maybe you can see this. This narrow part actually allows for some flexibility so that the bit itself doesn't break when it has all the pressure of the impact driver bearing down on it. If you're going to do woodworking, you just need to pick up a set of drill and impact drivers. These are Milwaukee sets. I got an M18 set and an M12 set. I'll leave links to these in the description. I have loved them. These aren't sponsored. Milwaukee's not sponsoring this video or anything, but really have enjoyed having these in my shop. Number 3 is a pocket hole jig, and this is the pocket hole jig that I love from Craig Jig. Now, I probably will get a lot of people in the comments saying, you don't need a pocket hole jig as a beginner. And a lot of people hate on pocket holes, but I personally think it's because they're so easy to use, it almost feels like a cheat code. Pocket holes will allow you, just a second. Pocket holes can allow you to join boards in a variety of ways. You can join boards together this way with a pocket hole jig. You can join boards together this way with a pocket hole jig. It just makes woodworking so much easier. I have a video where I go in depth on pocket holes, so I won't do that here. I'll link it right up here if you're interested in watching that video. But all a pocket hole jig does is drill a hole that will toenail a screw or put a screw in diagonally to join boards together. That's a quick explanation of what a pocket hole jig can do. When I got this pocket hole jig, I was instantly much more confident in all of the projects I could make. And a little pro tip, if you're brand new to woodworking, go to Craig's website. I'll leave a link down in the description. And they have a ton of really high quality, absolutely free project plans. And so if you're wanting to build an outdoor sofa or a swing set or whatever you want to build, Craig probably has plans for the project you're looking for, and they're free and they make amazing products. So the haters are going to hate, but I love this pocket hole jig and I'm standing by it. Number 4 is sanders. If you're going to be in woodworking, you got to invest in at least one sander. I'll be honest, I do not like sanding, but it's a necessary part of woodworking. The sander I would recommend you get is this Craftsman 5-inch random orbit disc sander. It is the most versatile sander you can buy. It's not very expensive, and I've had the sander for about 3 to 4 years. I put it through the ringer, as you can tell, and it still works amazingly well. I also have this Bosch sheet sander. This is probably not a beginner sander, but I'll link to it in the description if you're interested in picking up one. It's a little bit more aggressive. It makes my sanding a little bit less time consuming whenever I'm working on really big projects. Now you're also going to need to invest in sandpaper if you're going to get a sander, and sandpaper has a numbering system that's pretty universal. Essentially, the lower the number is, let's say you get 60 grit versus 120 grit, the lower number is going to more aggressively remove material from your work piece. And you want to start sanding at the lower numbers, think 40 grit, 60 grit, and then you want to work your way up 120 grit, 220 grit, whatever, until you get to the feel that you're going for with that project. Quick tip on sandpaper. You can't jump straight from 60 grit sandpaper to 320 grit sandpaper. It will not work. And so you can only increase up to 50% of the number you're using. For example, if I'm using 80 grit sandpaper, I can only go up to 120 grit sandpaper for my next round of sanding. After I've done 120, then I'll jump to 180, then I'll jump to like a 220, etc., etc., etc. Don't get in a rush with sanding. Take your time, and your woodworking projects will look and feel much better. All right. Number 5 is clamps. Now, if you're new to woodworking, you've probably already heard some woodworkers make jokes about you can never have enough clamps, and it's actually true because clamps allow you to hold pieces of wood together while you're either gluing them together or fastening them together. They are super handy in the shop, but here are your top 2 clamps that I'd recommend for beginners. Number 1 is an F-style clamp. F, this way I think for you. F-style clamp. These are really, really nice because you can get bars that are pretty long, so you can clamp together bigger work pieces. I think this is a 24-inch F-style clamp, and so this is just super, super handy. All you do is let's say you want to clamp something together, run this down to your pieces, tighten it up like this, and you've applied pressure to your workpiece. The second type of clamp I would recommend getting are these quick grip clamps. They're relatively cheap, but they last. For me, they've lasted a long time. These are by Irwin, and you can just quickly tighten up your workpiece, get it clamped together. You're going to need clamps as a woodworker. There's tons of other clamps I could talk about. I just don't really want to talk about clamps for that long, so number 5, get some clamps. Okay, those first 5 tools, they're the bare minimum, kind of like you just gotta have these things to do any type of making or woodworking. These next 5 tools, they might move a little bit into the intermediate category, but they're still kind of the essentials that you need as a woodworker. Let's go. Number 6 is a table saw. Now this is probably gonna be the most expensive tool that you purchase, but there are table saws that you can get and make amazing projects with that will not break the bank. Now what I have right here in the shop right now is a SawStop cabinet saw. I'll link to it in the description, but it's a more expensive saw. Now it's also an amazingly nice saw. It's the nicest saw I've ever used, and when I first turned it on, I was blown away by the difference a very nice table saw will make. Also, the SawStop has some safety features where if you accidentally touch your finger to the blade, which would mean cutting off your finger on another saw, on the saw stop, the blade stops like insanely quickly, and you can look up videos about that if you're interested. However, there are other great job site saws. Think like DeWalt, Milwaukee, all of these brands make job site saws. Some are battery powered, some you can plug into the wall, and they are great starting spots for you. I'll leave some links in the description to some saws that I would buy if I was starting all over again. Hopefully that will be helpful for you. A table saw, very similar to the circular saw that I talked about earlier, can make cross cuts. It can cut boards down this way, but it can also make rip cuts. That's kind of where the table saw shines. It's very versatile, but what's better about a table saw than a circular saw is you're taking your project to the tool, not the tool to the project. And that's just kind of a good woodworking principle for any type of tool. Whenever you can take the project to the tool, generally speaking, you're gonna get more accurate cuts and better results on the final project that you're making. Table saws also have tons of accessories that you can add on to make your experience using table saws better. They're very versatile. You can cut angles on table saws. There's tons of stuff you can do with table saws. You can look up other videos if you're interested in more in-depth stuff with table saws, but you absolutely need one as a woodworker, and that's why it's in this video. Number 7 is this beast of a machine, and it is a planer. Once again, a planer, there's just some tools that when I bought them, it took my woodworking game to the absolute next level. And I remember before I had a planer, I was trying to build things like a box, and the box just looked really funny because the boards I were using, they were way too thick. It just didn't look right. What a planer does is when you feed a workpiece through on the front end, it comes out the back end as a thinner board. You can also use a planer to take a board that's a little bit twisted or maybe has a cup in it and flatten it out so that it's perfectly flat and ready to work with. If you're buying all your lumber from a big box store, you're working with 2x4s, 2x6s, plywood, that kind of stuff, you could probably get away without a planer for a little while, but if you're gonna continue in woodworking, eventually you're going to need one. There's a lot of debate on if you should get a jointer or a planer first. My opinion is you should absolutely get the planer first because you can actually make some jigs to run through a planer that can do similar things to what a jointer can do, but you can't do it the other way around. So at some point, I'd recommend getting a planer. This is their DW734 model. It's linked in the description, and they have a bigger model that I want to probably upgrade to soon, but this planer I've had for about 5 or 6 years, and it has done an amazing job. It's a beginner planer, but it's a really good one, and I would recommend it. So links in the description if you want to check it out. Hey, before we move on to the next tool, if this video has been helpful for you, if you've learned something, if you could just smash the like button, it would mean the world to me. It really helps me out. Thank you so much. Let's check out the next tool. Number 8 is a miter saw. Now, a miter saw cannot make rip cuts, but it can make angle cuts and cross cuts. Where a miter saw has an advantage over a table saw is that it can accommodate boards that are much longer. For example, in my shop, at least the way my shop is set up, I can't cut down a 12-foot board on my table saw. I'm gonna be hitting stuff in my shop, but I can take a 12-foot board when there's not junk all over this workbench and lay it down and cut it down to size with the miter saw. A good miter saw is just a great investment to have. This is a really old DeWalt miter saw that actually has been my dad's for a very long time, but I'll leave a link in the description to a couple of miter saws that I've used or would recommend. Also, if you're gonna get a miter saw, I'd recommend getting this guy right here. It's called a $1 million stick. And what this does is allow you to put pressure on work pieces that are a little bit smaller while you keep your hands away from the miter saw. In all woodworking, you want to make sure you are safe. You want to keep your hands away from blades or spinning router bits, and tools like this will help you do just that. The link is in the description. Number 9 is a router. If you're gonna get into woodworking, you've got to get one of these. It will take your woodworking to the next level. Now, this is a Ryobi router that I just picked up. I actually just did a review on the channel on this router. I'll link it right up here if you're interested in checking that out. I go a lot more in depth on this router. I also have a Bosch router that you've probably seen me use in previous videos, but routers are amazing for adding profiles. Say you want to add a little extra design flair to a cutting board you're making. You can add a chamfer bit bevel all the way around the cutting board. You do that with a router. This Ryobi router actually would be a great router for beginners. I also have a Bosch router. It's probably a little more expensive, but I have loved it as well. For a router, I would just think through, do you want one that's battery powered so you don't have to fool with cords, or do you want one that you don't have to worry about charging a battery all the time? In that case, pick up one that you can plug into the wall. And beginner tool number 10 is a dust collector. I feel like this is the tool that I might get a little bit of pushback on. People will look at this machine, which is a more probably intermediate level dust collector, and they'll say, that's not a beginner woodworking tool. And I'm not saying you have to get this dust collector, but I really think dust collection, especially if you're gonna be working inside, like in a confined shop, is very, very important. It's important not only for keeping your shop clean, but it's important for your health. Getting a bunch of sawdust in your lungs, it's not good for you. And when you get a dust collector that can collect not all, but the majority of the dust, you're taking a good step in the direction of making sure you're working safely. Now there's other things you can get later, like ambient dust collectors. I'm not talking about that. I just think you need something to keep the majority of the dust contained from all of your other woodworking tools. For example, your table saw, your miter saw, your router, your sander, all of these tools are going to generate tons of sawdust. And if this sawdust is just floating around in the air, it's not going to be good if you're breathing that in. This dust collector I can hook up to various tools at different times and make sure that I'm keeping my shop clean and keeping the air clean as well. There's tons of different dust collectors. I'll link this one in the description. This is probably not a beginner one, but it's a great one. It's by Powermatic. You can also even get setups with a shop vac and a dust separator that makes sure that your shop vac isn't getting all clogged up with sawdust. There's a lot of other videos out there about dust collection. I don't have time to go into all of it here. All I'm trying to say is you need dust collection in your shop. You're not going to get it perfect the first time, but just start somewhere. I think that's an important aspect of woodworking. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 woodworking tools that I believe beginning woodworkers need to invest in. If you're wanting to get woodworking tools so that you can make money woodworking, I talk about making money woodworking in these two videos. So check out one of these videos and I'll see you there.